What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
Hey, my name's Dave.
And this is the deep dive, and we are in week 2 of this series called A Generous Life. And this one is the impact of generosity, correct?
Impact of generosity, right, yeah.
It's going to be a good topic, I think. It's going to be good to kind of get into and all that. We are filming on Halloween, though.
Yeah.
We didn't really dress up.
I guess not.
So, I did. That's right.
This is my Halloween costume.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll talk when we get back into it. All right, so Dave, this is are you a hiker? What are we saying you are? If this is your
Tired man.
a tired man, okay,
That's my costume.
fair enough. I mean, I can't say anything more. I'm in a hoodie too. It's just cold this morning,
Very cold.
so it was
It's gonna be
just
cold with trick-or-treaters tonight.
It is. We are going out tonight, and I'm like, man, the costume I do have set aside doesn't have a lot of warmth attached to it, so trying to figure out ways to
Yeah.
get some warmth.
In years past, had almost gone overboard with the costume.
Yeah.
But I haven't done that in several years. It's about time I'm going to get back into it.
Yeah,
It's been a lot going on, and, it takes a lot of creativity to,
it really does. Normally our family has a theme, and this was the first year the girls were like, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this, so we just everybody kind of did their own thing and see how it comes together. But
I'll be expecting a full report with pictures.
a full report. We'll get you there for sure.
Yeah.
But let's jump straight into it here, Dave. We started this series. We knew it was going to be 2 week, and as you kind of said, it's that topic. It's that thing that we're talking about, but it's important stuff to talk about.
It is. Stewardship is important.
Yeah.
When we talk about all those different ships that are in the church, discipleship, and through that is there's fellowship and leadership and stewardship, and how we use the resources that God has so graciously given to us, whether they're our time, our talents, or our treasures. People are great with you talking about time and talent.
Yeah.
But when it gets to treasure, sometimes it gets a little dicey with folks. But it's been very well received. People have been very kind with. I tried to approach it a little bit different this year, and someone sent me a text and was talking about the sermon. They said, you made it sound like it was a privilege to give, and not kind of begging for money. And if that came off that way, I'm glad, because it really is. We've been given and blessed so much to be able to give back. It's just, and so this week we're looking at the impact of generosity. And I think and I started with a question, and that was to ask people to reflect about somebody in their life who had drastically or transformed or changed their lives because of their generosity. And it didn't have to be, something monetary. It could have been time or that kind of thing. But, I had a story that I shared, and I wondered if you might have a
Yeah, actually, I kind of thought about that as you were talking about it Sunday, and mine was monetary, and I have no clue who this person was.
Yeah.
I can only speak to kind of the circumstance, and it actually happened just a few years ago here at this church, and I came into the office one day, and there was just an envelope sitting on my desk, and it had a really well-written long letter of just how God had led them to do something for me, and they didn't know why, all that stuff, but just it had scripture part of it. It was just really, really touching, and the backstory that they didn't know or anybody else would have, is just like, it just happened to be a particular time where finances were tight because, it was stuff like with our animals having to get extra stuff at the vet. We had a couple of illnesses in the family and stuff like that. We were just stretched pretty thin. And sure enough, there was just a sum of money sitting in there. And it was just such a freeing feeling.
Yeah.
I think you said it well on Sunday that, like, it wasn't necessarily the amount, but it was just knowing how, like, God was going to provide. You were talking about you weren't going to go back to school and stuff like that, and just all of a sudden it just changed the mentality. It's like, okay, I can breathe a little bit. I don't have to stress this much. and now I can focus back in on what I want to do, which was serve the church.
Right. And the person giving it, what they received out of it, was something as well.
Yeah.
And that's just the cool thing. I think when we get in line with that, with just being generous people and being able to give and to receive well, that you can to be a part of God's creative process in the world. And it really was, it sounds like it was for you.
Yeah.
A story I told on Sunday of someone who reached out in a very generous way to my family when we were at a really difficult place. It really was this assuring that God was with us, that God had not abandoned us. And that's, that's just how God sometimes works within God's kingdom, I think, with us when we're being generous. But, when we give, we get back, I think, so much more. And, I sing it simultaneously, kind of changing the world for good.
Yeah.
Because, it leads us to places of hope and encouragement. And so one of the things that I mentioned on Sunday was that I think there's scientific reasons that can help us understand why it benefits us to be generous people.
Yep.
And it does tie into some scripture we'll get to in a second. But there's this thing that sometimes they call it the trust hormone and the love hormone called oxytocin.
Yep.
And I joked around because when I told Teresa what I was doing, she heard, and I might have said, because I slip up with words sometimes, Oxycontin. She's all like,
That'd be a very different story.
how are you doing that? But no, oxytocin, and this is a hormone that our body produces that we need. Mm-hmm. And our body wants it. But when we do acts of generosity, we get a little shot of it.
Yeah.
And then the person that, is receiving it, also gets a little shot of it. And then the people that actually watch that happening, like I got a little shot of oxytocin hearing that little story you told just then.
Yeah.
And so there's benefits for that. And one of the things that oxytocin does is it goes in and breaks down or reduces the cortisol that we have within us, the cortisol that, and that's the stress hormone. When we get stressed out, our body needs this oxytocin to come in and take off. So from a scientific, biological reason, it's important to be generous and to learn to be generous and to, and learn to receive well in generosity and all that stuff. It just improves everything about our lives. So we want to live our best lives, then, be generous people.
I think it's interesting when you talk about oxytocin because, me and my wife will joke about that as like, I need my hit of oxytocin. We'll give each other a hug because there's something like connectional and bonding about when you get oxytocin from each other. And I think about times that I've been generous.
Yeah.
And not that I would ever have expected anybody to return, but I always felt like closer to the person that I was being generous with. Like there was just something, I don't know, that provided an extra level of care or, I don't know.
Well, one of the things they say is like, when a mother has a baby, her body gets flooded with oxytocin, and that's a bonding that happens and that naturally happens in nature. And I think that does. And within the church, people who are more generous with their time and their talents and treasures seem to be more close to the church and involved. It makes you become bonded and a part of the community. So there's all sorts of benefits. And so, looking at scripture, and this is the really cool thing is when I've dug down into some science or heard some science, where I see it aligning up with stuff that's in the Bible. And maybe it's not word, it's written in Bible times. And so, the language may not, they don't use oxytocin and things like that. But Jesus did have this scripture where he talks about laying up your treasures in heaven or in eternal things. And it talks about where, the rust won't come in and corrupt and, the moss won't come in and feed and all that kind of stuff. And I got to thinking about like in our human bodies, we talk about like ending oxidants to get rid of all the, the bad stuff. And it's sort of, in a sense, it's sort of like that when we are stressed, and, there's studies around this too, that people feel less bonded, feel a less part of the community, pull into themselves. The way to get out of that is by being generous. And there's scientific reasons, but I think there's biblical support for that. That when we're laying up our treasures in eternal things, that we're living our best possible lives. Makes sense. So, I really like that. And, there's other scriptures I think that also support that as well that we could take a look at. But one of the things is, I didn't go into it much on Sunday, but the importance, I think, of modeling and teaching generosity to our children. And I read this one thing online about, some studies around that. Then kids are going to learn to be generous by watching the significant adults in their lives be generous.
Yeah.
And, the article went into more depth. It's like, you actually need to talk to them about why you're being generous and why it's important to do that.
Yeah.
And it helps them grow in empathy and self-confidence. So many benefits that we have. It's such a struggling time to be a child or a teenager. One of the solutions, there's other things as well, for sure.
Yeah.
But is to engage and be taught about generosity. And I think that's something the church does, but I think it's something that maybe we could even be more intentional about.
Yeah, I think it helps, like when you, especially with kids, I think when you can put them in a perspective of like, look how much you do have,
Yeah.
and how can you use that to be a better friend, or how can you use that to be a better classmate or whatever. I think all of that really matters when you can teach them, hey, yes, you can generously help with your time because you understand the math, and someone beside you might not. Or yeah, you can give a kid a pencil because you have 50 more. That's not, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there are spaces where you can help your peers.
This is sort of bonding and, growing in empathy
Yeah.
towards another human being.
Right.
I mentioned on Sunday, I look at the Boy Scouts and I get to be a part of, stopping in here every once in a while, but particularly like Eagle Scout ceremonies. You and I were both just at once. And, I was reminded again, just some of the character qualities that the Scouts teach.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is giving back to your community.
It is.
And I just think that's something that we need to be mindful of. I am aware. I mean, I really get excited when I see like our children doing mission projects where they're making sandwiches for homeless people and things like that. I think that's both Sarah and youth and Nicole and children do a really good job of doing ongoing mission things with the kids.
Yeah.
I think that's important. But
I'm glad you mentioned the Boy Scouts, because I think, the pack that we have here has always been very generous with their time. Even last week we did the trunk or treat and had a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And they're always at the center of volunteering, whether it's putting people, parking them, or jumping out and helping watch over the bounce houses or running fires and stuff. And they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
They're not connected to our church by anything more than they use our space, but they want to give back because of the energy and time. And they were out there hauling pumpkins around and stuff like that. I think they're a group that does model generosity well, at least at their time.
Yeah. We've had this, sort of a focus on United in Ministry here at Hickory Flat lately. And I think if you look at events like the whole pumpkin patch thing we did, it was a church-wide thing, and there's been so much goodwill that's come out of that, with people being generous with their time and their efforts there. And there's also been some generosity with people buying more pumpkins than they needed. But then an event like last Wednesday when we did the trunk or treat, I had no idea how many people were there, 1,500 people maybe total. And, a third of that might have been volunteers, people that were there, and the goodwill and the good feelings that we have about doing an event like that draws us together, makes us feel more connected as a church. So,
it always feels good to be able to give part of what you're doing for a collective good. It does.
And so, the other side of that with our children is with our senior adults. And I look at the senior adults that here at our church that are so involved and the connection that they have. And, and it's their community, it's their family. A lot of them, their children are grown. A lot of them sadly, some of them, their spouses have passed away, but yet the church is their family and their community. And there's lots of things, both self-reporting, but also, some studies that have been done of just how when a senior citizen, a retired person is involved in a church, in community life like that, giving back, volunteering, giving of their time, talents, and treasures, just their mental health and their expected life expectancy, and all of that is benefited because of generosity. So, there's a lot to be said. And, just for us average people that are sort of in between, although I'm pushing the senior adult thing now myself, but is that, so we grow in creativity and optimism, and all of those things happen when we're more generous.
Yeah.
So, it's all important. It's something that, I feel like our church is doing a good job on, and hopefully we'll continue to grow in that.
Well, again, I'd also like to just reiterate, like, if you're trying to, maybe you're sitting here going like, I don't feel like I'm a very generous person. Just do something small. You know what I mean? Like, don't feel like you have to throw everything out the window and be like, I give everything to everybody and whatever. But just buy somebody a meal.
Yeah.
Or do that thing where people, the drive-through, pay for the person behind you. Well, check what they ordered first.
Yeah.
For the record, you don't want to do it for the 15 family people, but maybe you do. But like, try something like that. There was I used to go out to dinner with an older gentleman. He was in it was in Virginia, and he just wanted to pour into the younger generation, and he just identified, like, we connected bonds over baseball, and he's like, can I just take you to dinner sometime?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure, and I fully intended to pay, you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things that I was like, let's just be in community together. And so we went one time, and we paid for our own meals and stuff like that. But he's like, I really enjoyed this. Do you want to make this a regular thing? So we started doing it often. And the more we met, he ended up being like, hey, I'd really like to pay for this. I would like to do this for you as just, thank you for what you do, but also just like, and it really meant a lot to me. But at first, I kind of fought him on it. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, no, I can pay for myself. You don't have to do that. And he was like, Nick, let me pay.
Yeah.
He's like, this is me wanting to be generous, but also this is me wanting to pour into you so this never becomes a thing. Like, you're a youth minister. You know what I mean? Like, you're not making bank by any means. He's like, I don't want this to be a hindrance. And when he said the word generosity, it's just really what made me think of, like, that he wanted to be generous in that way. And I was kind of in the way of that, because I was like, no, I will pay for myself. And it always has shifted my focus when people are offering to pay, because I'm like, well, if they want to, I want to let them express their generosity that way.
Yeah, I think we have to be good givers, but also good receivers.
Yeah.
Looking at because, it's not always monetary. And so there's sometimes that people would take the time to write a note, or to make a comment, or to do some service around the church, or some service for us individuals. And I think it's important to know that, because I think part of that that makes it happen is to also receive well, and to be able to be grateful and say thank you, and that sort of things. When you were saying that, I was remembering when you got the meal thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were there one of the nights, but like there's a men's group that gets together once a month, and we have pizza and here.
Yeah.
And talk about Jesus.
Right.
And
Pizza, beer, and Jesus.
Yeah. And so one night we were there, just a group of 10, 12 guys around a big table. And one of the guys in the group had to leave early. In fact, he could only be there for just a few minutes. He came by, and so we got ready to leave. Somebody said, well, your check's been taken care of. And so everybody said, it was so-and-so. He did that. That was very nice of him. So next month, we get there, and he's there the whole time. Yeah. He gets to the end, same thing happens. Okay? It happened like 3 months in a row, and we have no idea who it was.
Yeah.
But it's just a sort of random acts of kindness and generosity, and you never forget. There was a oxytocin moment there.
Yeah.
of being the receivers of that generosity. And so, and so like one of the examples I used was like, when you throw a pebble in, it sends out these, these circles, and I think generosity is like that. Then, when generosity breeds generosity.
Right.
And I really think a lot of some of the cure for the ills of the world today is to breed that generosity out of the community, because the more generous we are, the more it helps the community. The more the community becomes more generous, the better it makes everything. So, a lot to be said to that. So, I want to talk about one more thing, because I was trying to look at our time too, because we got pretty long-winded the last couple of these. One thing, and this wasn't original with me. I saw from a friend online. I came up with a little slide for it, but just like sort of the steps that we have to travel around, the pathway of generosity as we grow in generosity, specifically thinking about it as it relates to the church, this sort of generosity pathway. And you mentioned, like if you haven't been giving, or maybe there's something, try the thing like paying it for the person behind you, or that I think most everybody is occasionally generous.
Sure, I agree.
And so, looking for, if you're at that place or you haven't tried it, or, you've been kind of holding things back, maybe try to, when the Spirit moves you, be generous.
Yep.
But the next step beyond that is to give in some sort of consistent way. And, I hope it's the church, but maybe it's your school. Maybe it's the Humane Society. But find some place with something that you're passionate about to give in some sort of consistent way. To help that. And, we could bring down, particularly you and me, working on staff budgets at this time, of how important that is to sustain the ministries of the church.
Yes.
And so we depend on those consistent gifts.
Yep.
And so, that's sort of the next step, is giving something consistently. And then beyond that, and, I didn't make it be a huge part of our stewardship talk this year, but, is sort of, there's this biblical standard of 10%. And that's just something that a lot of Christians in their life strive for, and there's biblical reasons for it, looking for what we call a tithe.
Yep.
That's what, in the Old Testament, it's kind of required of them. In the, in New Testament Christianity, modern Christianity, sometimes we kind of look at this sort of ethereal thing, but it really is, I think, something in our spiritual lives, if we're going to be all in, is to be on the journey to get there. And, there may be very good reasons why people can't get to that, for a while, but I think that should be a goal, is 10%.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, once you're giving that, sometimes we're all tapped out, but then it's surprising how God will bless that, and we'll have additional resources or additional time or whatever to give beyond that. And so, I guess that would be sort of growing beyond the 10%. And then the other thing, which I think we need to talk more about in the church, and that is sort of the legacy giving, and particularly with folks of a certain age, and I'm getting there myself, as I said. But, is to consider, like, if we went away, and the church is sort of dependent on that as we make a budget, and someone passes away and they move away, how is that legacy giving going to go on? So finding ways, whether it's getting into some sort of endowment, like, we should develop here at the church. We had one fund that was set up by a family who left a goodly portion to the church, and that was put up into a fund that we draw interest of, and it's repeated giving, and then it's going on and on, way beyond their life. There's ways of remembering the church in your will.
Yeah.
And then we have one of the guys on our trustee is an insurance person. He's talking about there's some pretty not that expensive little riders that you can do in your life insurance, so that the church could be remembered in your life insurance. I would call that legacy.
Yeah.
And, I think moving forward in the sort of the climate that church is in today, we need to be talking and helping people see how they can be legacy givers to the church. So,
well, and just to clarify, legacy giving is that you're giving to the church well beyond your time there, but it's not just so that the church keeps lights on it. It's so that the church does ministry for children and youth for years to come. It's It's so that you could pay a staff to be able to focus in on how to better move the church forward. Like, this is what you're tithing. This is what that legacy giving goes to. And it frees the church up to focus on ministry, to reach out to the community that you're probably living in right now, that you want to see grow and just be something better in the future. That's hopefully what the church does.
Right. Yeah, it is. And the church has been, I think, shy about that, but I can tell you colleges and universities and hospitals are not.
Yeah.
People are getting letters about that all the time.
All the time.
And so, I do think that's something the church needs to be more involved in, and that is that sort of legacy giving, because, the whole economic structure of church has changed over the years, over my lifetime.
Yeah.
Kind of over your lifetime at church too. So, how we fund the church for ministry may not be strictly out of the offering plate anymore as it was at one time. And so we're going to have to, find those other ways and the other resources that we can use it for fuel. Money is fuel.
Yeah.
For ministry. And so the best ways, hopefully, we as leaders in the church need to be good stewards with the money and resources that we have. But it all works together because we all get this benefit from the generosity, and hopefully, God is glorified and all that.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, I think all that stuff is good stuff. I think it's stuff we need to just kind of process through and remember. And I know you said on Sunday that in a couple weeks that there will be this time of we'll be receiving pledges.
Yes.
Pledges cards were sent out, and
they haven't been sent out. There's you, if you're watching this, and hopefully you're in the church email. If you're not, then and you would like to be. If you're active person here, either watching online or in person, and you're not getting church emails, let us help you by writing in the comments. We'll help you get signed up for emails. There is a letter, I think it's coming out on Thursday from me. It's going to sort of reiterating some of the stuff that I said in this past sermon. There's going to be a PDF of the pledge card and a couple of other resources along that. And I'll be doing that a couple of times over the next 3 weeks, leading up to November 19th, which is the Sunday before Thanksgiving. We're designing a whole service around gratitude and Thanksgiving and sort of, the harvest time. And so on that Sunday, there'll be an intentional time to be able to take your pledge card or estimate and giving card or whatever to the altar. And, from that, it helps our leaders in determining a budget, but it's mostly for the individual.
Sure.
It really is. You don't have to fill out a pledge card, but I think it's a helpful exercise in helping us keep our commitment. If we put something down in writing, we're more likely to keep that commitment.
Absolutely. Well, so that's coming down the pike, and again, just start along this pathway that Dave was talking about earlier. If we're starting at some giving, partial giving, or a percentage here and there. Take it maybe to that next step. And it doesn't have to be just money to the church. It's in your generosity and time, talents, and energy, as we've been talking about, times, talents, and finances, as we've been talking about this whole time, is how we be generous with all that's been given to us, and how do we make that a commitment going forward.
Yeah, and I said this at the end of the service on Sunday, and I'll say it again today as we get to close.
Yeah.
And that is, the guy in the story that I told, you can watch the sermon. I told a story about a person who reached out to us when I was in seminary and about to get out because finances had just gotten impossible to us. And it really blessed us. And, it gave me the hope to, and after that, I never looked back. Within the first semester, I was about ready to give up. But the reason he did that, he said, was because we were going through a stewardship campaign, and he was a faithful giver to the church, and he was praying about it, like your story you told, and it felt like this was something that God had called him to do. And so, I hope you give to the church, but if nothing else, if this has inspired you in generosity, I hope you will find a place to be generous in your life, wherever it is, because it's going to make the world a better place. We certainly would like to have it at the church. but I think it's more important that it happens.
That we practice the generosity.
Practice the generosity wherever God may need you to place that generosity.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, you know where to find us if you have any comments or questions. We'll look for a link to sign up for the e-news so that we can get you your pledge cards and all that good stuff. But without further ado, Dave, you have anything to add here at the end?
God bless.
All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.